Welcome back to the Backwards History Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Will, here with my co-host, Kevin. Say hi, Kevin.
Hi, Kevin.
Shut up, Kevin.
You know what? I think I will.
Yes, we are going to flip this around a little bit. Usually we give you the historical implications first, and then I get to jump in and put on my tinfoil hat or what have you, and people seem to enjoy that. But this time, I think this one kind of lends itself to the opposite approach. But before we get into that, I need you to go and like, share, subscribe, rate, review, all those good social media thingy things. And don't forget, you've only got 1 week left to email us at backwardshistorypodcast@gmail.com. Get the questions, get us the answers if you've already emailed us, and we will be announcing the winners on our 50th episode. This is the Quarantine Rants Part 3, Bill Gates. I think you know where I'm going with this.
Oh,
a lot of you are going to think, I know you do. A lot of you are going to think that I have my tinfoil hat on a little too tight. And then Kevin's going to come in. Bill Gates. Granted, I'm going to go ahead and preface this that I, for the longest time, was an Apple fanboy until the unfortunate passing of our genius and savior, Steve Jobs, passed away. And it seems like Apple's just been doing the same thing over and over and over that, you know, was put out while he was still alive and not really changing much. So my views of Bill may be a little bit skewed on that regard and the way that certain things were handled between Microsoft and Apple back in the day. But that does not change the fact that Mr. Gates is a little less than someone I want to trust. Bill Gates has been trotted out with the media during this whole pandemic situation as the expert or SME or whatever you want to call it on vaccinations for people. Bill Gates was one of the designers or the CEO of the company that designed a operating system plagued with viruses, and they couldn't even solve those. And you really want to trust him to solve a virus in people through the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Never minding the fact that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is heavily intertwined with Planned Parenthood, whose main purpose, main use is what? Kevin?
Follow the literature they put out. It's all about healthy birth or things of, I'm not really sure how to put this without sounding one way or the other.
Abortions.
Well, yeah, let's just come out and use the word abortion.
It's abortions. That's the main purpose or use. Maybe
Or
not the
use.
main purpose.
Definitely
But
use is a large one, yeah.
It's like the purpose of the internet may be one thing, but the main use per statistics is porn. But never mind the fact that Bill and Melinda Gates have gone into public and talked about population control at the same time as pushing vaccinations for the health of everyone. Well, how are you going to both control population and save everyone? It sounds like two conflicting goals, does it not?
Oh, yeah.
Forgetting the fact that Bill Gates' father was the head of Planned Parenthood, whose position was preceded by a guy who was not only the head of Planned Parenthood, but a member of the American Eugenics Society. Oh, and just a warning, you may hear puppies squeaking in the background. Unfortunately, our dog had puppies this week, and the only place to keep the dogs away from my 2-year-old is the studio. Sorry, not sorry. Gotta do what you gotta do.
Oh, well.
Moving on. Rich people are powerful people. They never want to give up either one. And they always want to gain more of either one.
Or both.
Typically both. If your foundation is heavy into vaccinations and things of that nature, what benefits you? more vaccinations.
Mm-hmm.
Bill Gates has come out saying that life will not return to normal until everyone is vaccinated. Everybody has vaccination papers to show on demand to the authorities. He's also come out to say that we need to implement what's known as, and this may get us flagged on YouTube. I hope it doesn't get us flagged anywhere else, but contact tracing, which is basically where they use your devices to track where you go, what you do, who else's devices are around, i.e., what other people you're around. And then if one of you gets infected, they can then trace who all that person has been around and da 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 da. Contact tracing. Another one of those implementations touted as good intentions. And I think we discussed last week the dangers of good intentions.
Oh, yes.
Now, that may not seem like a bad idea.
On the surface.
On the surface. Until you realize the abuses that are rife within it.
Oh, yeah.
You can then track anyone, anywhere, for any reason. And during this pandemic, a bill was passed giving the FBI the authority to look through your internet traffic without a warrant. That's a little extra. That's not necessarily on the same coin, but
FYI.
right. All under the guise of good intentions. And then, on top of that, there's a push to change our society into an entirely digital currency. A global digital currency, if you will. That sounds scary. It all sounds very 1984.
Oh, yeah. Big Brother's watching.
Big Brother's been watching for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't want you to take my word for it. We've seen how history repeats itself. And I give you my half of all of this. And yeah, sure, maybe my tinfoil hat's on a little too tight. But maybe Kevin can give you a different perspective. Kevin?
I think you will. I'll certainly do my best. Now, we'll mention the American Eugenics Society. Now, that might sound familiar if you watch those commercials with Frank Thomas about eugenics. Completely different. Just want to go ahead and clarify that. I remember when that commercial first came out, I was like, man, that's a poor choice of marketing name right there. Just it's way too close to eugenics.
It's only a poor choice of marketing if people remember because they're never taught these things.
Yes, I didn't learn this till I was deep into my history program. And when I learned this, I was just completely and utterly appalled. But we'll get there. I'll make sure everybody's appalled before this is over. Eugenics, this is the textbook definition, is how to arrange reproduction within a human population to increase the occurrence of inheritable characteristics regarded as favorable. Who decides what's favorable? As Will alluded to, typically the rich and powerful. Eugenics is, on the surface, just an idea. Until these ideas are put into action, when things are just on paper, they look fine. No one's been affected, no one's been hurt, no one's life has been drastically altered permanently. Eugenics starts in 1883 by an English statistician, yeah, that's a tough word, named Francis Galton. And it's basically just applying, well, if we take the most able body of our population and they're the only ones who, procreate, then the better genes get passed down. But again, who decides which genes are more favorable? It takes off in the United States around the turn of the 20th century, 1900. And then the federal government gets on board with it. And they start implementing what's known as compulsory sterilization, where they're basically trying to weed out the undesirable population. And this would include immigrants, people of color, poor people, unmarried mothers, the disabled, and the mentally ill. Now, if you go over that list, none of these, or a lot of these factors, you don't really have any control over. Most of us are born poor, born a particular race, or born in other countries, or unfortunately are cursed with some kind of disability or some kind of mental impairment. It's one of these things of you saying because I was dealt this hand in life, I'm not good enough to pass my genes on to the next generation. Now, this was a federally funded program that took place in 32 states. 32 states. That's over half. And it ran from 1909 all the way until 1979. For 70 years, the U.S. government federally funded compulsory sterilization. Now, to kind of put that in perspective for you, when this was done in 79, Will and I will be born in less than 10 years.
1987, baby.
88, what's up? Now, we're born not even 10 years after they stopped doing this. But that's not the most recent. Currently, the California prison system is being accused of sterilizing 150 female inmates from 2006 to 2010. And in the accusation, it states that the state paid doctors over $140,000 to perform these forced sterilizations on female inmates. The fact that that happened so recent, I almost can't put into words just how unimaginably awful that is. Now, there's a quote by an individual who really took eugenics and ran way, way, way left with it. The quote goes, "There is today one state in which at least weak beginnings toward a better conception of citizenship are noticeable. Of course, it is not our model German republic, but the United States. Be Adolf Hitler." Eugenics was popular in the United States, and it spread very quickly until the Nazis got a hold of it when they came to power, and they twisted and turned it even into their model for a pure Germany, a pure world. We're gonna take out those we deem unfit to live in society with us.
The ultimate Aryan race.
Exactly. It was based off a U.S. idea, one that continued on after the horrors of World War II were made public to the world. This is something that has affected numerous people. One of the largest or most devastated demographics was Native American women. In an attempt to end Native American societies, they forcibly sterilized these women to prevent them from having families and carrying on their lineage. So yes, this can happen because it has happened. This is something that incredibly recent. People were being forced. You're not good enough to have children. You're subpar to those of us who are, and therefore we have decided in the best interest of everybody, you don't get to procreate. You're not good enough to have children. Your genes are subpar to ours.
There's speculation that royal families and really, really, really old money families have practiced a measured amount of inbreeding.
Oh yeah, royal families are notoriously back-a-ways. Not so much inbred's a good word, but it's very, very, very close family ties. That's why so many had genetic disorders.
In an attempt to
purify the blood.
Right. Keep it in the family, right, for lack of whatever to put it.
Quite literally.
Right.
I just really want to stress that just how recent this has still been going on. And it's so not known by so many people. It's one of those yet another shameful chapter in American history that gets, swept under the rug in, I guess the public education system. But again, how do you talk to children about something like this? It's something that it needs to be remembered so it doesn't happen again. Anytime you try to forcibly remove a race of people or a certain demographic of people for whatever reason, that should never be forgotten.
Now, something a little bit more recent that has been, for the most part, swept under the rug during this pandemic. Epstein didn't kill himself. And I'm not saying that as a joke in this instance. Back to Bill Gates. Some of what I'm about to say was actually aired on national news media. Granted, I don't pay them too much heed to give them too much weight. But Bill Gates tried to deny his relationship with the late Jeffrey Epstein over and over and over until it was found that he'd taken trips on his plane and was photographed with him and another individual, which shows an even deeper tie between the Gates family and Epstein. I can't remember the guy's name, but the head science officer or head science expert or what have you of Microsoft and the Gates Foundation, same guy, was the backup executor to the Epstein estate. There's a connection. Let me go on to another connection. The Gates family is heavy into genome project and vaccinations, yada yada. One unknown portion of Epstein's life, while he was, in my opinion and several others' opinion, he was a state actor, a intelligence tool used to get high-level people to do things that are not okay with underage women, film it, use it as blackmail, including several high-level people, which could explain why he's dead, not by his own doing, or even why it was, if it was by his own doing, that would be a good reason too. But Epstein actually owned a ranch, and this was on NBC, owned a ranch in the Midwest somewhere, and his idea was to seed the human population with his DNA by wanting to impregnate at least 20 women to live on this ranch and then continue the process over and over and over, most likely paying the women for their services as surrogates or whatnot. But apparently Epstein had a flair for the genome type sciences. And that's kind of been quietly swept under the rug, along with Bill Gates trying to deny his connection to it. So you've got Epstein sharing some of the same interests. You've got Bill and Melinda Gates' foundation and Microsoft sharing the same science guy, and that same guy being Epstein's backup executor to his estate, which was fairly massive, including a private island. What do we usually say about coincidences on here, Kevin?
Yeah, we're not big fans of coincidences.
Not at all.
Especially when they start to pile up.
So to begin with, before I went down the Bill Gates rabbit hole, I didn't trust Bill Gates pushing a vaccine in the first place. One, they're trying to push it out too fast. Two, this guy couldn't even solve viruses on his own operating system. He's not a doctor. I don't trust anything that he's pushing to go into my body. And he's got way too much to gain in his population control agenda, his monetary or advancement agenda, his power agenda, the whole nine, by these things being pushed on the American people and the world as a whole, I'm not a fan. And I will not, for multiple reasons, but those are definitely part of it. I will not take a vaccine. I don't care if it's a quote unquote requirement or not. I refuse. I will not take any vaccine for the coronavirus. Won't do it. Kevin?
That sums it up pretty well right there.
Don't trust it. Do you?
No, again, too many coincidences, especially when a tech billionaire is telling you about a vaccine. Like, oh, I just happen to have this vaccine here. You should probably take it. I think that when we were discussing earlier, it's like that plot in the Simpsons movie where our only solution is to encase the city in this large dome. By the way, I just happen to make large domes. Come by mine for it. You know, when you're
right.
when you presenting a problem and a solution, it's a little coincidences again. You know,
Kind of like starting a fire and being the only fire truck in town.
right?
That's not a kick towards first responders. That just happened to be the analogy that came to mind.
Right. It's just one of those things of, I have the problem and I have the solution all together, and I'm creating the supply and the demand in a sense. You understand?
In a sense.
The timing part of it too is really odd to me. Like this thing, the media have you believe comes out of nowhere, and then, oh well, I'm Bill Gates and I have this vaccine I've been working on.
Or, well, he hasn't had one he's working on. They're working on it currently.
Still, it's one of those things of why you. I'm one of you. I'm like you. You're not a doctor. You don't have what's your backing on this? It's just a thing of too much too soon kind of thing. Like, why is Bill Gates pushing this? If someone's a car salesman, that you expect them to sell you a car, but all of a sudden they're trying to sell you a house. Like, what? It just
right.
It's weird. At the end of the day, it's just odd.
Granted, he has not been at the helm of Microsoft for some time, but
he did step away. It's true.
There's a lot of ways Bill Gates and his family intertwines with things they shouldn't. And there's a lot of ways that Bill Gates intertwines with Epstein in ways that make you wonder, like grants for some fund for Epstein doing virology research or some genome research, that kind of stuff. And it's really odd at the timing of when he didn't kill himself and when all of this came about. Things are a little hairy and it's weird. But I mean, I may sound like I got my tinfoil hat on real tight tonight, but Kevin gives you a little bit of background on things, and we've already talked about how U.S. government, intentionally infected people with different diseases and things like that on purpose, just to study things. So it's not entirely out of the wheelhouse. But as always, we definitely don't want you to take our opinions as fact. We're not experts. I really, really want you guys to look this kind of stuff up, especially this. I promise you, you will be surprised and probably appalled and most likely kind of scared by the things that you find when you go down some of these rabbit holes that we give you a little peek into. So, as always, do your own research, form your own opinions, trust, but verify.